Hey, everybody. Today we want to talk about food anxiety, what it is, how you can help your horse with it, what are the signs, everything about food anxiety. And then specifically, we want to talk about how to help horses with food anxiety in training sessions that involve food. So positive reinforcement, clicker training, fear-free, force-free, all of the the words that might be used, positive reinforcement focused. I don't know. There's probably some other ones that I've missed here. Anyway, my point is that or even balanced or mixed training, meaning that or combined reinforcement. So you might be combining negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement, or pressure and release and positive reinforcement. Or you might refer to it as like pressure and release and clicker training. If you're combining clicker training into kind of your everyday training, that would be kind of probably falling into the mixed reinforcement or combined reinforcement. So this will also help you guys that might be doing that as well. I specifically focus on more of a positive reinforcement approach, although I do work with clients that mix, and I also work with clients that don't really mix, and meaning that they mostly use negative reinforcement, pressure and release, and then they do some clicker training for a few things. But the horse, or even not even in training related at all, this could also help if your horse is just experiencing generalized food anxiety. So feeding time is terrible, and maybe they're really going after their herd mates, or maybe they've chased somebody out of their stall before. Well, we're not going to do a deep dive and, customized behavior consult here. We are going to talk about a lot of different tips and tricks and supportive measures to helping horses with food anxiety and just generally discussing. So without further ado, Megan, how would you explain what food anxiety is? Like how could we define or explain food anxiety?
Yeah, I think of it as, or a really easy, straightforward way to think about it is when you have stress associated with getting food, there are some general anxiety and stress, which I know we could even dive into both of those deeper. What is anxiety and what is stress? But there are negative emotions and
and by negative emotions, you mean the horse is in some level of distress and emotionally dysregulated, right?
Yeah. At about how to access that reinforcer, or just it's been so repeated that now there is that association with the food. And then we have to work on making that new association, which is, of course, then the overall goal. But I think in the simplest terms, we could say that food anxiety is a unpleasant, stressful association with food.
Yeah. I think I agree with all of that. I tend to think of it as they are emotionally dysregulated around food. And that word is being used a lot these days. Dysregulated, the horse is dysregulated. I don't mean in that the horse is absent of all emotion and response to the presence of food. Because a lot of times people look at, this is a whole other topic. We'll have to do another 30 minutes on dysregulated and what that means in the horse world. But really quick, a lot of people, that word is being used for any kind of animation or emotional reaction from the horse. And people look at a regulated horse as a horse that is kind of robotic and flat, right? Emotionally. And that's not what we're talking about here. That we don't believe that is the best way to look at that in the academy and at TWE, the Willing Equine. And so when I use the word dysregulated, I mean that they are having a really hard time controlling their responses around food. They are really becoming really pushy and even aggressive or angry. We see a lot of redirection type behavior, taking their aggression out on their herd mates. We see just heightened aggression in general around food. And so agonistic behavior towards the herd mates and or towards people. And so food anxiety, like you said, Megan, is about their mindset, is about how they feel around food. They generally are very anxious and worked up whenever there's the potential for food. And that's what that term food anxiety is identifying. Like it's just our word that we're using for a collection of behaviors that we see from our horses in relationship to food. It's abnormal behavior. So horses, I guess to be able to understand what food anxiety is, we have to look at what is normal for horses. Mm-hmm. For horses around food, again, they're designed, I feel like I say this in like every single conversation I have, but they're designed. It's important, I know. They're designed to eat 18 plus hours a day, right? That's not hunting for 18 hours and then getting a meal or getting a couple meals throughout the day. That is literally chewing. They're grinding 18 hours a day. Now, that's not straight. They take breaks, et cetera. But they're designed to have continuous access to reinforcement. And when the resources become restricted or limited or scarce, this starts sending their nervous system into, oh my gosh, things are tight. I need this for survival. And they start getting anxious about it. They need to access it. They need to go for it. So normally a horse sees food. They're like, okay, cool. I eat food when I'm hungry. I don't eat food when I'm not hungry. They're not hunting for this, remember? I mean, they seek around and they forage for things, but there's generally edible stuff around. I mean, they live on it. They walk on it. So they're not having to do a lot of seeking and a lot of searching for extended periods of time. And instead we're eating a little bit and then we do a little bit of something else and we eat a little bit, and they get that freedom to choose when they're eating and when they're not. And they eat for a lot of time and they're relaxed about it. If you've ever watched horses out in the pasture or even around a round bale in a dry lot or on a track system, they munch for a while, then they do something else for a little bit, and then they munch for a while and they move around a little bit, and they're really relaxed about it. They almost look like they're falling asleep sometimes. Not always, but a lot of times they're kind of like just kind of doing their thing and eating, right? Anything outside of that, or not anything, because there's levels, right? There's a scale. But when we get too far to the opposite side of it, where they're like, oh my gosh, where's the food? I'm starting to stress about this. And they're really like, anytime there's a scent of something, anytime you have some treats in your pocket, anytime there's a potential for getting hay, they're chasing off all the other horses, and they're also chasing down the little kids to get the carrots that they've got, and they're coming at them full teeth, all these things. These are signs of a horse that is really struggling with food anxiety and how they feel about food. So that's the very long operationalized food anxiety definition. Do you agree with all that, Megan?
Yes, absolutely. I think that it can show up in so many different ways, and we'll get to how it could show up in training as well. And they are very similar to how they express themselves. But yeah, it's definitely a big pushback for using positive reinforcement training when the owners see how their horses already behave just in their everyday life. So they're like, this can't possibly work. But yes, it can.
Yeah, I know. Let's go and strap food onto ourselves around a horse that attacks its neighbors that have food. That sounds like a really good idea. I mean, I don't really blame them for not wanting to do that.
It seems impossible.
Seems really unpleasant. Seems quite dangerous, actually. Oh, yeah. No, we're going to get to that. That's going to be because none of us want that. I train with food. I train with literally bags and bags of food every day. And Maggie does too. Like we go through so much food. We train with food all the time. So we're going to help you guys. We're going to help you understand how to help your horse with food anxiety. Okay. So what are the signs? Like what behaviors do you look for, or do you commonly see in a horse that you would identify as having food anxiety?
Yeah. So if I'll go on your pattern, if we start off by just, observing the horse, or did you want me to go more the training route?
No, you go with every day. Go with just out in the pasture first.
Okay. Yeah. So a horse that is just living its everyday life, we will, see signs of resource guarding. So pushing other horses, its herd mates, away from, its hay pile. And that could look like different levels. It could be, full blown chasing and lunging at other horses away from their hay pile, or it could even just look like a bit tense when other horses approach and get too close to their resource. I'm going to say it's hay. It could also very commonly look like getting, I'm going to say stressed and anxious, but we'll go vocalizing, pawing, pacing, for feeding time too, whether that be hay meals or grains of any kind. That's where we could get a lot of food anxiety.
So when around like the hay bale, we've got certain
Mhm.
signs, which would be like the first ones you said, such as chasing the companions off, really guarding that resource so nobody else can get it, and or just a lot of agonistic behavior between the two. So bite marks, kicking out, ear pinning, tension in the nostrils, tension in the eyes, stuff like that. And then now we're moving over to feeding time potentially, which could either be, like you said, some hay, loose hay, or hay nets, and or grain. And then so proceed for it. Go ahead with that.
Yeah. No, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, we could definitely see a lot of food anxiety when we get to mealtime, of course. And then that's a big, quote, red flag, that there's food anxiety present. So like I said, you'll see, a lot of pawing, pacing, moving. Horses can even then resource guard if they are together during feeding time. If they are already worked up about the anticipation of their meal coming, then they can also like resource guard the location, or just if other horses are nearby, they want their companions to be farther away from them so they can have access to the resource first.
Yeah.
So that is a big sign that we see in like everyday life with our horses. And then in training sessions, it can still look like resource guarding. So if other horses are nearby as we are doing a session with positive reinforcement, the horse that we're working with, they can get tense, ear pin at other horses, even disengage from us and go chase off other horses that get too close. But then it could also look just like mugging us for food, following us around, maybe in between sessions. Our horse will have a very hard time standing still during a session. And then we could even see it as signs of like vocalization in mares, and dropping in geldings is a big sign of that too.
Yeah, feeding time and training sessions can look a lot alike as far as what food anxiety looks like. I tend to see a lot of kicking, pawing, circling, pacing. I'll see horses, like if they're in a stall, let's say, you'll see like teeth marks on the side of the wall from them trying to go at each other, but there's a wall there. You will even see resource guarding towards people. So as you're coming in to deliver the food, they get really worked up. You'll see biting, things like that. You'll see lots of calling. I don't know. I'm sure everybody's been in a barn at least one time during a big feeding time, and everybody's like, you're just hearing the doors banging, right? And you're hearing the vocal, like the calling, like it's feed time, and everybody's interpreting this as the horses are really excited. So excited, we tend to interpret as a good thing, right? And when the human language, we think of excited as like, oh, we're excited to go Easter egg hunting or something like that, right? We're anticipating, but it's a good thing. In this context, though, that level of excitement is not a good thing. It's anxiousness. It's where's my food? Desperation, anticipation that has been building up, especially if our horses have meal times, regularly scheduled meal times. A lot of times there's this build up coming up to the feeding time. You'll start to notice about 30 minutes to an hour before feeding time, they start to get more and more restless. I don't know if you've ever tried to do a training session during feeding time. That's always goes interestingly. Or trying to do a riding lesson during meal times, or even I've been to horse shows where I tried to compete, like do my round while feeding time was happening at the barn and like back in the stall area. That didn't go very well. So this is all anxious anticipation of the food and falls into that food anxiety category. And then when we get into a training session, like you mentioned, we see a lot of behavior. You mentioned mugging. So to operationalize mugging, that's really when your horse is up in your personal space and they're running their nose, like sniffing for whatever you got or trying to put it in your pouch and stealing your food. If you've got like a training pouch on, or if they know you've got a peppermint on you somewhere, or even if you don't right now, but you have in the past, and they're basically mugging you, like you're being held hostage and being mugged. That's why we call it mugging. And these can all be signs, and they can happen during feeding time, and they can also happen during training. And then you mentioned the dropping and the vocalizing. So some vocalization is normal in horses, but we have to remember that they're not very auditory species. They don't vocalize a ton. There's certain contexts, like if they're separated, so through panic, separation anxiety, they will call for companions. And then there's some care-based vocalizations. And then there's vocalizing that can happen from anxiousness. This is usually like a chuffling, wuffling sound. I don't even know what you want to call it, but it's like little nickering sounds. If you're hearing that a lot during training sessions or during feeding time, that's anxiousness building up, right? And the dropping, there's some controversy around this, in my personal opinion and in my experience, my professional experience over many, many, many years of working with horses with food. When we're seeing a lot of dropping during training or feeding time, this can be linked to an internal state that is anxious, right? And lots of anticipation build up. And then we get this relief moment when they get the food, and then the dropping happens. So that can be another sign. Not always. Horses drop for other reasons too. They drop for relaxation. They drop for thermoregulation. They drop for medical reasons, but it can be a sign. And all of these, again, are possible signs. They are not exclusive to food anxiety. So we want to look at whole picture. And we want to look at the whole context around what's happening. We want to start accumulating, like documenting what type of behaviors we're seeing and how much of it we're seeing at one time. And that's what leads us to, we're potentially, the assessment of, or potentially dealing with food anxiety. It's not these individually, it's them as a collective when food is either has a potential to arrive or is currently arriving or is in front of them. Then if all of these are starting to accumulate and happen, then we're like, okay, we're possibly dealing with food anxiety here. And so I think that was a pretty thorough list. I'm sure there's some we missed. Tension in the facial muscles. I like to call it sharking, when you get like a herd of horses that are anticipating, all the buckets of food coming to their pasture, and they're all just going back and forth and kind of chasing each other off. It looked like a swarm of sharks coming, like with chum buckets and stuff. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that in the ocean waters. But that's what it reminds me of. And so we want to see if we can help them out with that, because that's a very tense, unpleasant experience for all of them. The horse that's chasing the other ones off and the horses that are being chased off. And it's also a recipe for injury too. So we need to be aware of that as well. It's not just a benign situation. It can have risks involved for the other horses and also for people. It's not safe for people either if all the horses are anxious around feeding time. All right, so what can cause or exacerbate food anxiety? What do you think?
I think probably one of the biggest ones that comes to mind is general restricted access to forage. That will, of course, make, whether that be in training sessions or in everyday for mealtime, you're working with a very hangry horse. So that will definitely not help you in that situation. And it will just really make the horse much more stressed and have those conflicted feelings that they really, really, really want that food.
Mm-hmm. That's a big one. Restricted forage access. And by forage, we mean hay, grass. Sometimes the grass is poor quality enough that they still feel like it's restricted because they're fenced into this area and they can't go get any other hay or grass. And so that can also be a restricted forage. So we need to make sure it's quality forage and that it doesn't run out. And I'm going to put this in here before anybody has any concerns or says anything. If you're worried about weight gain or if you have a metabolic horse, I completely understand. I have a whole herd full of them. There are specific strategies that we use to allow our horses 24/7 forage access and maintain a healthy metabolic state. So we're going to use low NSC forage. We're going to make sure it has good mineral protein content, all of that. We're going to make sure that their system is well supported, that they're getting plenty of movement. And then we're going to trickle feed, slow feed the forage. So either through a soft slow feeder net or another source, we just make sure that they're getting slow consumption all day long. And then we won't have to deal with the medical outcomes of just like throwing a huge round bale. I'm not telling you guys to run out there and put a big round bale out there or throw your horses out in a big sugary pasture. We have to be mindful of how we're doing it, thoughtful of how we're doing it, educated in our actions. But that's, again, a whole nother conversation. But anyway, keep going. So what's some other causes?
Yeah, I think something else that goes, I think, hand in hand with having a restricted forage access is the gut upset that can cause, because horses as a species, they're, like you said, they're designed to eat for that 18 plus hours a day. So then when all of that is restricted, their digestive system really kind of goes haywire. So then, that could lead to ulcers, just other, inflammation in the gut, discomfort. So then on top of the restricted forage access, you also have horses that are in pain. And then, so that could be gut upset, but then other sources of pain throughout the body. It could be, arthritis, it could be, hoof pain, etc. Any pain that your horse is experiencing will make your horse closer to that threshold and less tolerant of, other things in general, but then also make them even more focused on the food and how to access it, and then even more excited for whether that be the food arriving or not having access to it in general.
Yeah, and considering how their digestive system works, where they need to chew to produce the saliva, and then they need the saliva to buffer the stomach acid. If they're experiencing gut discomfort, they're biologically like being screamed at, like you need to eat, because the saliva soothes this. The saliva helps, but you can't produce the saliva without the chewing. So when the chewing is restricted, we have a problem. So gut upset is a really big one. Another one is horses, like if they are in a pasture with horses that resource guard from them, like keep the resources from them, or they're just overcrowding the amount of resources that there are, this can aggravate that food anxiety, because now they are having to fight for their food, which is also not a natural behavior for them. Out in the wild, they don't fight over the same blade of grass. Now, there are instances where during certain periods, certain seasons, like droughts and such, there will be resource guarding that is documented over water, and sometimes some other resources as well. But it's not very common. It's not supposed to happen like it does in domesticity, where every day, all day, they are fighting for their lives over this resource because there's one hay bale and 20 horses, or even if there's 3 hay bales and 2 horses, but one of the horses continues to chase the other one off and just go round and round and round. I mean, that's also going to cause a problem. So other horses can definitely aggravate any food anxiety that's happening too. And you already mentioned fear and pain. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that goes back to what you said earlier, that it affects both horses. That just because, let's say, your horse isn't the horse doing the chasing, but it's being chased off, that is then creating food anxiety for your horse as well, being that they are pushed off and they are restricted. And then when they have that opportunity, they're going to feel more likely to need to defend it. So
the horse that is doing the chasing, those behaviors are getting stronger and stronger every time it works. So they're getting reinforced for those behaviors. So that's also going to make the food anxiety worse as well. Fear and pain. So pain, we already talked about. Pain of any type can shrink your horse's green zone. So they're trigger stacking, right? I don't know. You guys have probably to some extent dealt with pain in your lives, and especially if it's been any kind of chronic pain or high level pain, all of a sudden your tolerance for anything is zero. Like if you have a migraine, don't talk to me, don't look at me, don't think about me, like don't even exist, don't breathe, right? And this goes the same way for a lot of other forms of pain. The same thing happens for our horses too. If they're experiencing pain, so let's say that they had an okay relationship with food before, but now they're in pain. This can shrink that tolerance zone by a lot, and now all of a sudden they're having problems with food because they're like, I can't deal with this. Like I need the food right now. So definitely pain can be a big factor in this, especially chronic pain can really create a lot of food anxiety. Let's see, what else do you think? So fear, the same thing with a fear, because again, the tolerance zone is shrinking because they're trigger stacking, right? Same idea. And then when we're in active training sessions, there's different things that we do that can, like, let's say we're in an active training session with food. Let's say you want to train with clicker training, positive reinforcement, or mixed, whatever. And your horse is demonstrating food anxiety in the training session. What is it that we could be doing in that training session, doing or not doing, that could fuel food anxiety?
Yeah, so I think it's really common and it makes sense for someone. So let's say, someone's working with positive reinforcement. So they just have food on them and they have a horse that is experiencing food anxiety. So then maybe they are, mugging, they're, getting more fidgety. They're doing things that we actually, like in theory, don't want to reinforce. So we would think to withhold and not give food at that moment. But the more we withhold the food and the when we decrease the amount of times that we feed per minute, let's say, that just escalates the food anxiety because then they already have these really big feelings about the food and now they can't get it. So they kind of then like feel like they need to scream and be like, what do I need to do to get this food? So that could be a very big factor too, on top of other things, that if you're in a active training session and your horse is displaying food anxiety, really what you would want to do is feed more and make it, so abundant, which isn't where our mind first goes. And it makes sense because we don't want to reward those behaviors that we are seeing. But the first step is also to make your horse feel more comfortable in the beginning. But that's maybe moving into something we're not talking about yet.
Well, I mean, we're going to go into some different how to help them.
Yeah.
The other thought of it too, just kind of jumping off of something you mentioned about wanting to not reinforce the behaviors we're not wanting to see, which is a good thought for sure. And that's where I started. I would withhold the reinforcer until I saw something I liked, and then I'd click and feed. That makes sense. The problem is that we're fueling this sense of scarcity, right? Mm-hmm. This anxiety around like, oh my gosh, how do I get the food? I don't know what to do. I'm going to try all these behaviors. And standing still is really opposite of what's natural for a horse. Horses don't stand still to get food. I don't think anybody does really, honestly. If we're thinking about all the species, they have to usually do something, mm-hmm. right? They have to offer a behavior. They have to act to get the food. And standing still is usually used for like rest and just hanging out and whatever, right? So when we're asking them to stand still to get the food and to wait to be cued and all that, that's really opposite of what's natural. So we have to show them that this is what's going to get reinforced, and we have to make it something that they can easily achieve to begin with. And for me in my program, this starts with, can you just stand here and I feed you? Like, there's no contingency. There's nothing you have to do. We're just standing here and I'm feeding you. And this helps with them not feeling like the food is scarce, them not feeling like it's running away from them. It's very predictable. It's right there. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't run out. We're just going to be here doing the thing. And it builds that trust. And it's all forage based. So we use low value hay, or like loose hay, chopped hay pellets of some kind. I don't use like any grains or anything. They also, we're using and this is working with a horse that's already had chewing time. So if they don't have 24/7, then we're doing some loose hay, like 30 minutes of chewing time before we start a training session. And we're just starting with making it super predictable, super accessible. You don't really have to do anything. It just arrives. Mm-hmm. And then gradually we add in some criteria, some things that we're looking for that we want to shape. And what's really cool is you would think like, well, aren't you just reinforcing all of these wildly out of control behaviors if your horse is super anxious and all that? The simple answer is no, actually has the opposite effect. And then the other thing that can come to mind is, well, aren't you reinforcing this anxious behavior? Aren't you reinforcing this emotional state? The answer is no, because we can't train emotions. But what we can do is modify the environment, modify the setup, modify everything that we can to help our horses get back to a place where they feel comfortable, and then build the criteria on top of that. So we build from a place of calm, we build from a place of feeling safe, we build from a place of just at ease, doing well, and then we go from there. But if we start from that food anxiety place and then we ask for more on top of that, we're building that anxiousness into the training. And this is when we start getting a lot of relapses. A lot of people will see some good progress with their training and then it falls apart, and see some good progress with their training and it falls apart. Or they'll continue to have mugging or food anxiousness well into their years of clicker training, positive reinforcement, or mixed training. It's because we didn't start from a place of calm. We started from wherever the horse was at the time, which was likely a little bit food anxious because most domestic horses are. And we built on top of that. And we don't have this understanding of creating, conditioning in this better emotional state into the training and then building all that criteria on top of it. So, and actually that wasn't originally what I was going to say, but it was a really great thing to add on to there. The other point I wanted to add, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, is that sometimes we don't reinforce enough or we don't offer enough reinforcement. So have a high enough rate of reinforcement. And we're not as free flowing and generous with our reinforcement. So how much, how often, all that, because of our association with feeding our horses. Because I don't know about you guys, but I grew up being told hand feeding your horses was bad. Treats would make your horse dangerous. Treats are, teach them to only pay attention to the treats. They're not paying attention to you. It doesn't build true connection. They lose awareness of their body. I mean, you name it. There's hundreds of thoughts out there. And none of it is really true. If it's done poorly, absolutely. You can create a whole big problem if you do it poorly. But if we come into our training with a sense of mindfulness and thoughtfulness around how our horses, their relationship with food reinforcement and the relationship with people, and we strategize our reinforcement strategies and all that around that, it makes a world of difference. And we don't see all these other issues, these other problems. So my kind of challenge to you guys that might be listening to this video that are worried that you're feeding your horses too much or too often in training, or maybe you're exploring the idea of clicker training, positive reinforcement, you've been doing a little bit or not at all yet, and you're really hesitant to go all in because you're worried about the fallout, like the other things that you keep hearing are bad about it. My challenge to you is to really sit back and evaluate your own relationship with feeding your horses and why there's so much stigma around that and where all that is coming from. Is it coming from science? Is it coming from people that have experiences with training with food and have done it well and are successful in, teaching people how to do that? Or are you taking to heart information from people who don't have a lot of experience in it and are only operating on the old information that they were taught, and now they're just kind of passing it along, like generational trauma kind of stuff around feeding horses food? So I think there's a lot to unpack there too on our side of it, and this will actually free us up if we can unpack that and really come to terms with all of that. It'll free us up to be better trainers and to help our horses through their own food anxiety if we can get over our food anxiety when it comes to feeding our horses.
Yes, 100%. I think that there could be so much judgment from other people in our lives about feeding horses, and especially if that's just, how you grew up and you still have those outside people just like still just like, like shoving it down your throat, like don't hand feed horses. And like, especially at boarding facilities, because they have so many horses, and that could just be like a unsaid rule almost, that, you
or
just
said.
Yeah, that's said too. It could be very loudly said in signs and everything, but that you don't feed horses, or you don't hand feed horses. So challenging that thought can be really challenging. And of course, and that's where having that guidance and overall just support with that process is very helpful too.
Yeah. Well, to summarize a lot of very quickly thrown at you guys information, food anxiety is coming from an emotional state where they're really dysregulated in active distress around food. It's not excitement because they're enthusiastic, it's something else. And there's a lot of behaviors that are linked to that you can look for that we talked about earlier. You can help your horses with their food anxiety through management primarily. It's going to be how you feed them, how they're taken care of, how they feel in their own body. This will have the biggest impact on their relationship with food. It's not impossible, but challenging to work with food if your horse has really restricted food access. Again, not impossible. I work with clients that this is the case, and we are able to work around it and figure it out because of restrictions, however it is. Something usually they're actively trying to change. We're just not there yet. But just know that if you can make a change to your horse's forage access and how their gut feels, you're going to see an elimination of most of it. Like, it's going to go, not right away. It can take months, and I'm not going to promise any specific timeline. It can be months. It can be a couple of years. And I hate using the years because it sounds like a lot. It doesn't mean that it's going to take, 2 years later, you're going to see a light switch and all of a sudden they're not fooding. It's going to gradually get better over time, as long as you're remaining proactive and helping them. And if you're really concerned, or you're not sure how to set up your management, or you don't know how to help your specific horse, like maybe it's one of the more extreme cases, we got a lot of resource guarding, maybe even resource guarding towards people. This is when bringing a certified equine behavior consultant on board is going to be really helpful, and will help eliminate a lot of that guesswork, and will get you guys on the road to success a lot faster. Then in your training sessions, working with somebody who understands food anxiety, understands where it's coming from, and understands how to help your horse and you have a better relationship with food, and training with food is going to be really important. It's just going to be so important. But we did give you guys some active tips on how to get started. It was kind of preliminary because there's a lot more to it. There's protected contact, there's feeding location, like how you're presenting the reinforcers and how much of it you're presenting and at what time intervals. Like, there's a lot of variables or factors for this to make it successful. So I do encourage you not to just run out there and start clicker training right now. If this is the only video you've watched, please don't do that. But maybe this will help if you're already exploring it, or if you're already been looking at programs or whatever, it'll help you sort out the type of program or the type of coach you want to work with, or just help modify what you're currently doing so that you can have a better outcome as well. All right. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for joining me today. And thank you guys so much. And again, as always, if you have any questions or you have any comments, we love to see them. We love to read them, and we respond to them all pretty much. So drop those and we'll get in touch with you. All right. Thank you guys.